This presentation will cover compare and contrast essays and when they are best to be used and how to formulate them when you begin organizing your material. When compare and contrast essays are used, I think sometimes students get confused by this. I think they um, lose sight of the fact that a compare and contrast essay, just because it can be written, doesn't mean that it should be written. You know, there are reasons that we need to write. All writing has a purpose, and these are the best purposes or reasons for writing the compare and contrast essay. The first is when we're comparing items that appear to be similar, but you actually believe as the writer that those items are different. Um, that the majority of the people, maybe you've read a text and people think two characters are alike, maybe you think two items are alike, or the majority of the people that you've talked to, or the consensus that you get back from your classmates, any of that, but you see an actual difference, then that's a reason to write a compare contrast essay. Another one could be that you're comparing items that appear to be different, or that the majority of the people you've talked to, or the consensus is that these things are different, but you as the writer actually see them as similar, and you want to explore that. The reason I say this is because a lot of people will often want to write a compare contrast essay that compares the obvious. And you don't want to write about the obvious. If I can immediately establish a distinction between two things or find similarities between two things, then there's no need to write an essay on that. So, focus on topics where it's the majority of the people, or the people that you're going to address in your audience, they see something differently than you see it, and that gives you a reason to write the essay in the first place. Some other reasons that you would write a compare contrast: perhaps you're comparing two items or options, one of which you prefer over the other based upon a specific criteria that you specify or explain through the course of your essay. One thing is, but these are the two options we have for what we're going to do. This is the most preferred, or this is the one I believe to be the best choice, and here's why. Another reason would be compare, which is similar to the one above it, is just comparing two items or options to report on their differences, or to report on their similarities, or to report on what our options are. And that's strictly a reporting type of essay. That's one where you step back and you're not really trying to be argumentative. You're just trying to show, here's this side, here's the other side. You try to be unbiased in the delivery of it. And when we're reporting, that's fine. The first three are more or less an argumentative approach to writing. And those are the things that you'll often have to do when you write essays for college. You'll have to write essays like that, or reports of that nature, sometimes in a job environment where you're asked to make a decision or give an opinion. But you'll also be asked at different times in college and in work, to just write a report. Just examine these two things and tell us, the differences between them. Tell us what the good is and the bad, the pros and the cons are for both. So compare contrast comes in handy for a lot of those. Argumentative writing is probably what I focus on the most with this presentation, but any of this information could be used for either an argument or a non-biased report. The way we format a compare contrast essay, there are two basic styles that you can use, two basic ways to organize the information. The first one is called the block format, and the other one is called the point-by-point format. The block format has a style where each item is separated into its own discrete section. In other words, you're going to write first about one of the items completely, talk about everything, then you're going to write in the next section or paragraph all about the other item. They'll never really touch one another. You'll just, here's this point, here's the other point. Moving on. The point-by-point format is a little more engaging with both topics, because what you do is you look at the individual aspects within each of the items and compare those directly within paragraphs. So, when it comes to this particular aspect, here's this side, here's the other side. Then you move to the next aspect, and now here's the other side, here's this side. And you move through it that way. That sort of engages the topics better. And I want to give you an example of this so you can see how it works if we were to write the essay. So let's say for this example, our family has to decide if we're going to take a vacation to the beach or to the mountains. Okay? We want to evaluate both options to help the family decide where to go, and then you or I have been tasked with comparing the two options and presenting the findings to the family. All right? So if we're going to use that, are we going to the beach or are we going to the mountains? If we're going to use the block format, here's sort of how the format would play out. We'll have an introduction that will say, should we vacation at the beach or in the mountains? Here's the plan. Here's the game plan for us. Then the first paragraph will talk about all the beach information. So in that paragraph or in that section, could be more than one paragraph, but all of it's contained in one place. We cover maybe the accommodations. Here's the daytime activities for the beach. Here are the evening entertainment options for the beach. My next paragraph, here's the information for the mountains. Here's the accommodations where we'd be staying at the mountains. These are our daytime activities. These are our entertainment options for the evening. And we may or may not, depending on if it's a report, if it's an argument, we may or may not have a paragraph 3, which would offer the pros and cons of both, where we would say, here's what the beach has to offer that seems better, here's what the mountains have to offer that seems better, and then the conclusion would be, here are the options we have, now we have to make a decision. So that would be the block format. And you see all that information is kept separate. Really, you talk exclusively about the beach in one part, exclusively about the mountains in the other part. Then there's a last little bit where you sort of compare both or talk about the issues as they relate, and then you conclude. So everything's sort of contained that's, in my mind, would be a really comparative or comparison, contrast situation. All of that sort of just happens in that third paragraph. Okay? And I will give you full disclosure that I'm not a huge fan of the block format, and I'll explain why later. But, different people have different preferences. But for me, the block format is a weaker approach to take. There are only certain situations where the block format should be used or has to be used. But anyway, we'll move on to the point by point. Point by point format, if I were taking the same information, if it was going to be the beach or the mountains for vacation, here's how it would look. The introduction, still going to be, should we vacation at the beach or in the mountains? But the first paragraph, instead of talking exclusively about the beach, I'm going to talk about the accommodations, because both of the options have accommodations as an aspect of it. So with this, I can say, here are the accommodations. The beach offers this. The mountains offer this. Of these, this one seems the best option of the two. If it's not an argumentative essay where you're not trying to persuade one way or the other, then the which seems the best of the two, you could remove that. You wouldn't have that. Okay? But here I've offered the accommodations. I've offered both. Then my next paragraph would talk about the daytime activities. Here's what the beach offers. Here's what the mountain offers. And here, this is the best of the two would be this, and here's why. Third paragraph, here's the evening entertainment, the beach offering, same kind of format. But what you're doing is you're talking about both of the items at once. You're pushing them into one another and you're comparing them. That way a reader can see directly what the differences are between the two things. If I look at the beach offerings in the other format, in the block format, I've got to wait another paragraph before I find out what the mountains offer in regards to that. And here we can see the comparison right away. It's immediately in front of us. And then we can have the same conclusion based on this. This is where we should go, or based on these findings, now we have to make a decision. So it's basically the same essay format. It's basically the same essay. It's a different format for both. Now, there are pros and cons to both, and I want to examine those, and we'll talk about it. When we're talking about the block format, it focuses exclusively on one item at a time. So, if you want to write in that manner, then it gives you a moment to focus exclusively on one of the topics before you move into the other one. It limits any actual comparing and contrasting to one paragraph, if that, because sometimes people don't have that third paragraph at all. They just say, here's the paragraph where here's all the stuff from the beach, here's all the stuff from the mountains, and now I'm going to wipe my hands clean, I'm done. And that to me is why it doesn't really fulfill a strong comparison-contrast element, because in a comparison-contrast essay, you want to see comparison and contrast throughout, right? And to me, it's like if you order a chocolate chip cookie and all you get is just a sugar cookie with one chocolate chip in it. That's not really a chocolate chip cookie, is it? So I guess that's my frame of mind with the block format. The other danger, I think, with a block format is, especially if you're trying to write an argumentative essay where you're bringing something new to the table, or you're offering a unique idea, or you're seeing some comparisons that other people aren't seeing, and you want to highlight that, if you keep the items so separate, then you run the risk of summarizing too much and you don't apply any critical thinking skills. If all I'm talking about is the beach and all that's my primary focus, all I'm doing really is summarizing the details from the beach. Whereas if I immediately throw in, but the mountains offer this, then that pushes me with my next sentence to explain why one is better over the other. Okay? You also can run the risk with a block format of writing a Frankenpaper. And if you've seen one of my prior presentations, I think on incorporating sources, we've talked about the Frankenpaper, where it seems like you've taken 2 papers or 3 papers or a bunch of stuff and smushed them all together and tried to make them one paper. And sometimes a block format essay looks like it's too many essays that have been stuck into one another. They've just been attached at the edge. Midway through, you switch topics and talk about something else entirely. And I think the block format really prevents you from having a strong thesis statement, because if your thesis says I'm going to argue point A and point B, then you're not really arguing A and B all the way through your paper. You're just talking about A at the beginning and B at the middle or the end, and then you're wrapping up. Now, the block format can be useful when you're providing just a basic report. Here's this idea, here's the next idea. Or when the information between the 2 items you're examining, when it's so different that you can't find those aspects that can push those 2 topics together, that you can examine them thoroughly by their aspects. But my question, if they're so different or disparate, then I'm not sure what the point of writing a compare and contrast essay would be for those, because the whole point is to see the contrasting ideas or the comparative ideas. So it can work, but like I said, the block format, it's kind of tricky, it's touchy, and it can lead you down an improper path. With a point-by-point format, the difference is that you're directly comparing both items that you're for the compare contrast. You're comparing them directly in every single paragraph. You're finding, or every single section at least, because you're finding items or aspects within the items that you can compare directly in that moment, as opposed to waiting until the last paragraph to do any of it. The comparison, again, it occurs throughout the essay, so you're really fulfilling the idea of what comparing and contrasting are. It pushes beyond the basic summary of points and forces a more careful analysis, which boosts critical thinking skills. And that's what teachers and professors go bananas over. They want to see that a student can apply good, strong critical thinking skills. And if you're pushing the ideas directly together, each of the items, then it's allowing you more space to create your own idea and have your own ideas or your own opinions about the topic based on what you've presented. And it's less chance that someone's going to say, oh, all you're doing really is just summarizing the points or summarizing details. And I think this format is definitely more effective when you're arguing, because the audience can see firsthand how you're comparing the items, line by line, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. Whereas if you're using that block format, they may have to wait for that 3rd paragraph where you try to bring together the pros and the cons, or you're evaluating the ideas in order to... they're having to wait until then to see the points being made, and a lot of times when students would come to me when I've taught or when I've worked in tutoring labs, and they would bring their essays in a block format because that's what they're comfortable writing. It's really easy once you've written it in that block format just to look and see how you can move pieces of the sentences of the paragraphs up and blend them together so that they actually turn into that point-by-point format. And if you do that 3rd paragraph from the block format, where you examine the good and the bad, or the pros and the cons from each of the items you've compared, you can work those up into the paragraphs already. You can move those up into the paragraphs when you separate them into the various aspects. So if you start with a block format, it's pretty easy to turn that into a point-by-point essay. So if you're unsure about the point-by-point, go ahead and write the block format, and then know as you're writing that then you're going to go through and find, well, where are the aspects I can compare? Well, here are the accommodations from this paragraph, the accommodations from that paragraph, and then my commentary on the accommodations in the 3rd paragraph. Let me just pull all those out and build that into a paragraph on its own. And then you can just take the pieces and move them around. So I think you can get a point-by-point format essay out of the block format. When you write, you want to be sure you use one or the other. Okay? And while my preference is point-by-point, sometimes it just doesn't work that way, and you have to do a block format, and now you know the ways and the approaches to take. So I hope this is beneficial for you, and good luck and happy writing.